Hello, everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of Set Lusting Bruce, your podcast all about Bruce Springsteen, his music, and mostly his fans. I am your host, Jesse Jackson. We are recording on April 2nd, so we just got word that there's going to be unreleased music going out into the atmosphere. And my new friend, Kathy, is joining me. Kathy, officially welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thank you so much, Jesse. Appreciate you having me on, and hello to all the great fans out there that bond over Bruce.
Absolutely. Let's tell us a little about yourself.
I am a 61-year-old school teacher who was born and raised in Utah. Now I live in northeastern Nevada. I come from a military family, so I moved 8 times by the time I was 14, but always ended up back in Utah. It was a unique experience. People have the same similar reaction when I say I'm from Utah. I am not of the culture of Utah, and so that was a very interesting upbringing for me to grow up in Salt Lake but not be of the Salt Lake culture. But I moved to Nevada about 25 years ago because you could make more money as a school teacher if you cross the border in Nevada. And I live literally 120 miles from Salt Lake City, and I live right on the border of Utah and Nevada. There's a West Wendover, Nevada, and a Wendover, Utah, which Wendover, Utah is where the Enola Gay trained for its mission to drop the bomb on Nagasaki and Hiroshima. So it's a very famous town, even though it's very tiny and nobody knows about it.
I'm curious, what branch was it your mother or your father that was in the service?
My father was in the service. He's a Vietnam vet. He was in the Army, but I come from a long line of military people. Both my grandfathers, one was a Marine, the other one was Army. My sons are both have been in the military. One currently is. I have a granddaughter in the military. My great grandfather actually was in the National Guard, and that's how he brought all of his family over from Sweden when they immigrated. Is every time he re-enlisted, he used the money to bring another family member over.
So my dad retired after 20 years. He was in the military, and I counted once. I went to 12 different schools, 1st through 8th grade. Like if dad was stationed somewhere, she would pick up this kids and move back to Louisiana so that she'd be near mom. So you might have this 3 different schools in 1 year. And in fact, it was really cool to me that by the time I was a freshman in high school, he had retired and they got a divorce. And so I was able to spend all 4 years in high school. But it was strange to me hearing my high school classmates talk about crushes they had in the 3rd grade.
I've dealt with that too, because my husband, his father was a captain in the Navy. And so every 2 years it was East Coast, West Coast, East Coast, West Coast. He had the good fortune of when he was in junior high, growing up in the San Diego area, then he moves back East Coast. But his high school years, he comes back his last year or his last 2 years of his high school years to the same town and is able to reconnect with his junior high friends. And then they have stayed in contact all their life. And they get together for the reunions and they talk and they share those memories. I moved around so much. And then too, I did get to go to high school in the same place for 4 years, but we moved to a very rural town east of Park City called Camas. And it is the Utah culture on steroids back in the 70s, early 80s. And again, I was not part of the Utah culture. So I was even further removed from those relationships. And I just don't, that's something that's a little bit hard sometimes when I'll admit I get a little jealous when he talks about those deep connections with people. But you know what? I think that's what I love about the Bruce community so much. Our family.
I do agree with that. My mom says it before she passed that she thinks that's why I was such a big reader, is that books didn't go away.
Yeah.
Like in my whether that was comic books or fiction, or those friends stayed with me.
Yeah, I was the same way. I still am a voracious reader. I'm reading 4 different books right now, and I love to read. When you live in the middle of nowhere and don't really have a lot of people around you, books become your best friends, and they take you on all of those adventures you're used to going on anyway. can't get rid of books. Like I have 10 bookcases in my classroom, and it's because I cannot get rid of my books.
So when my mom died this last summer, there were a lot of books that I had given her, and my poor lovely bride, without thinking, we don't have any room for any more books. In fact, I think she was the happiest I went to a Kindle, but I can't stop buying real books, quote
Right.
unquote. I, I read this a long time ago, and I apologize. This comes across very sexist. I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, but someone said, I buy books the way some women buy shoes.
Well, somebody who's into running and has so many athletic shoes, I take zero offense to that, even though I totally resemble that remark.
Yes, I did that. So growing up, what kind of music was your family listening to?
It's interesting. So, again, I am not of the Utah culture, but I did
Yeah,
grow up in Baptist church. And
yes. That we grew up in a Baptist church as well, Southern
okay.
Baptist.
Yeah.
And like when we moved to Louisiana permanently when I was in high school, I mentioned to mom, like, why do they have fish every Friday in the cafeteria? And there's a lot of Catholics in Louisiana and you eat fish on Fridays. And not that she knew that much about Catholicism, but she knew
Right.
enough about that. But yeah, I assume that it is.
Well,
And
it's different because the kids around me went to what they had primary when you're in elementary, they have mutual when you're in junior high and high school. Monday night is family home evening. And all the kids that go to primary and mutual, they used to get this ring that said CTR, choose the right. And you
yeah,
all wore it. And it was something that you earned, but you all wore it. I mean, everybody had the ring.
yeah,
And if you didn't have a ring, it was like, where's your ring? It was just one of those weird things. I went to a Baptist church. And then, interesting, this is how religion is. I think everybody goes on their own faith journey and has to find their own truth. But one of the things about the Baptist church, which belongs to the larger Christian denomination, is they still tend to argue over interpretations of theology. And so when I was in first or second grade, there was this big argument in the church over predestination. And the next thing I know, we're not going to this church anymore and we're meeting in homes. So
yeah.
then it got even more awkward in terms of explaining my identity to people. But going back to the music question, I grew up a lot with the Christian music, and you have the old rugged cross and holy and how great their art, but then you get the good stuff that you got down in Louisiana, and
Yeah.
you get that real Southern Baptist. And I loved that music. And my mom, a band called the Chuck Wagon Band. Yes, okay, you know them. And
Yes.
so that played a lot in my home. Another very heavy influence, because my dad wasn't really a music, he was, I don't want to say he wasn't a music guy because he plays a zillion different instruments, but he was into classical music, horns, because his dad was a big band leader, but he was not a pop, rock and roll, was not going to have the radio on kind of stuff. But my grandmother, my Nana, who is 104, still lives on her own.
Nice.
She and I have a very close relationship, and we always have. And some of my very earliest memories are of my Nana picking me up in her great big Ford Galaxy. First thing she would do is set me on that bench seat, buckle me in, and she always put me right in the middle in front of the radio. She told me, put the radio on, Kathy. And then she let me listen to everything and anything I wanted. I spent a lot of time with my Nana on weekends. She would take me out in the yard, set me up with a lounge chair and a book to read and a TV tray with chocolate milk and a peanut butter sandwich. And she'd bring the radio out and she let me listen to everything and anything. And so I was exposed to a lot of music through her. So that's my early music background.
I love that story. So my parents, the joke is they listen to both kinds of music, country and Western. But no, my mom did love 50s rock, Bobby Darin, Fats Domino.
Yes.
My dad was very much, I remember he went and bought an album because he wanted to hear somebody singing Peace in the Valley besides damned Elvis Presley. Some of my happy memories were Saturday nights going to the church where the Chuck Wagon Gang are these little family musical groups. They traveled and they would sing and they'd perform and I love the music. In fact, I started dating Linda in 1980, converted around 82, 83 to Catholicism for her. And so I've been on and off the Catholic Church and still don't know as many hymns as I do if you put me in a Baptist church. There is
Wow.
70% of the time I'm going to know the song, and probably closer to 80 or 90.
Here's the thing. To try to fit in, went to Mormon churches a couple of times.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, no disrespect to anybody out there that adheres
Yeah.
to the faith. My husband was raised Catholic. And so when we first got married, we both did the Catholic thing. And I went to Catholic church with him. And I'm like, okay, this music I'm sorry, that's the one thing that the Baptists got right was
Yes, absolutely.
music,
Yes.
man, the gospel.
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah.
Definitely.
One of the things you shared with me is you were not an early Bruce fan, correct?
Oh my gosh.
So one of the questions I usually ask is, can you remember when you first discovered Bruce and what about his music spoke to you? So I'll ask you that question, but this is a little bit a different journey, isn't it?
It's a total different journey. I'd heard the name Bruce Springsteen. I saw him a couple of times on TV. I think maybe like when he was doing something with Obama or something like that. But for some reason, I never heard his music on the radio. And I'm going to blame it on Utah.
Okay, there we go.
I'm going to blame it on Utah. That Utah is 100 years behind everybody. And then when you move to Camas, Utah, your choices are country and Western, and Bruce was not on the jukebox. And that was the thing about me is I had a few artists that I was hooked on. Rod Stewart, Bob Seger, Jackson Browne. But I never felt like I was all over the map with my music. And I never felt like I had that one band that was still around. Of course, the Beatles, but
yeah,
I'm born in 63 and they broke up before I can really appreciate who they are. So I felt like I was wandering in a musical desert trying to find my church. And I just never had very few artists that I felt like I could listen to their albums cover to cover that were still together, you know what I mean? And spoke to me. So anyway, what happened is I'm a school teacher and I am going through this magazine that I use, Junior Scholastic magazine that I use to teach my students current events. And I come across this picture of the Beatles. It's a poster. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to put this up because I'm a huge Beatles fan. And it has this little logo on it that says Teach Rock. And I'm like, what does this Teach Rock? So I look into it, and it's about this organization that is introducing music and arts as a way to connect with kids and integrate it into their curriculum. They just happen to be doing a free workshop for teachers in Las Vegas. That is 6 hours south of me. And I am sitting there trying to figure out every possible scenario as to how I can get down to Vegas the next day and get to this thing. But I said to myself, no, you can't do that. So I'm sitting on the couch, though, because I'm very intrigued by this Teach Rock. And I see that the founder is Steven Van Zandt. And I'm going, I know that name, but I don't know who it is. Now, if anybody that knows me knows I am very passionate about two things: music and education. And so I want to dig into everything I can about this Teach Rock. And so now I start looking into who is this Steven Van Zandt guy and what is this curriculum? And so I see, and I'm like, oh yeah, the dude from Sopranos. And then it's, oh, Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band. I'm like, oh. And so I became obsessed with once I saw how good the Teach Rock material was, I was like, oh my gosh, when people are bashing education and teachers, and I work in the system and I know the failings that we are going through, and I know why we're going through, and they're not the reasons that you're hearing. And here you have somebody who is offering a solution, and it's the real deal kind of solution. I needed to know everything I could about Steven Van Zandt. And it just happened that same time, I was part of a program, a teacher training program, that I was having to travel to the district office, which is 110 miles away. So I bought Sirius XM. And I said, okay, I am fascinated by the Stevie Van Zandt guy because of Teach Rock. I'm going to hear what he has to say in his music in Bruce Springsteen band. And so I put the E Street Radio thing on. Kevin Bacon was hosting the DJ show, and I listened to that show, and he played The River, and I'm going, oh my God, that's my mom and dad's story.
Yeah.
No retreat, no surrender. And I'm like, oh my God, that was my best friend, Jamie. She was my salvation before I moved to Camas. And as I'm listening to this show and I'm listening to this music, it was just like, I was no longer in that desert looking for my church and my people. I found it on radio, and I have been hooked ever since then. And that's how I discovered Bruce. So I'm on the treadmill one day working out, and I got the TV on. It's on Access TV, and they're showing a Bruce Springsteen concert. And I had tuned in like right in the middle of it. And it's this concert where they're singing Blood Brothers.
Yeah.
And it's the part where Bruce brings everybody to the front of the stage and they hold hands. And
Right.
I'm like, I felt that. And I said, I want to be a part of that. Like, I want to be at those shows. And it's like, when I found out how long Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band have been around, and I realized that they have been around my whole life, and
Yeah.
I didn't discover them until 2014, 15.
Yeah.
It's like finding out about the Beatles, having been around for the Beatles, and you were there, and then you only hear about them after they break up. That's how I felt.
Sure. I'll
Mhm.
discover a writer that I'm like, how did I miss this person? How did I miss her work? How did I not know this? Why did you decide to start teaching?
That was a fluke too.
Okay.
So I was married to my first husband. I had two boys. I had gone to college right out of high school, and I didn't know how to be a student, and I didn't know what I wanted to be. I just knew I wanted to listen to music and have fun.
Okay.
And so I worked at a ski resort in the winter. I worked at a golf course in the summer, and I worked at the arena where the Utah Jazz play during basketball season. And then I worked at Baseball Diamond in the evenings. And so that's how I was earning my money. And then I was in this marriage. And my dad knew the direction that the marriage was going, and he kept telling me, you need to go back to school. And so I honestly went back to college just to get, at age 29, just to get my dad to be quiet.
Okay.
And so I'm like, okay, what class would Daddy take? Daddy loves history. I'm going to take a history class. And I really enjoyed it. This professor, Dr. Bauman, who, bless him for everything, I really enjoyed taking this class. For the first time, I felt like I was learning something in school. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to take another one of his classes. I took another one of his classes, and basically I kept taking his classes, and he pulled me aside one day. If you're going to keep taking my classes, you're going to need to figure out what you're going to do with it. And he actually had me teach a class and video it. And then he and I broke it down together. But what happened in that process of me planning a lesson and then preparing and then teaching the lesson, I discovered that was my passion. It was like, oh my gosh, this is really cool. I love to talk.
Yeah.
I love to be on center. I love connecting with people. And teaching allowed me to do that. And it became my passion. And so, yeah, that's how I fell into teaching. Sure enough, my dad was right. My marriage fell apart. While I was doing my student teaching, I had to student teach at the school. I thought I had everything figured out. Ended up meeting this guy who was teaching at Highland High School, and I observed his class, and we've been married now 27, 28 years.
That's nice.
Yeah, I ended up working in his basketball camp and doing my student teaching, and yeah, so it did a lot of great things for me.
So when you are discovering Bruce, you've talked about how you felt like you found your church. Can you articulate why it spoke to you so much?
It's just, first of all, again, the songs he sings, when you hear that song and you think they wrote that song for you.
Yeah.
I listened to The River, and the first time I heard it, I'm almost in tears because that's my mom and dad's story in some ways. And when I heard No Retreat, No Surrender, that is me and my brother, who are so close and so tight, because he was born in 62. I was born in 63. I have a sister who was born in 59, but me and my brother, we have this bond that is just unbelievable. That song takes me back to that really happy time I had in my life when I had me and my brother, my best friend Jamie, he had his best friend Kelly, Danny and Buzz, and that would have been our anthem. I lost that because we moved again.
Yeah.
And it's just, there's just so many songs that they speak to you. And I don't know how you just, if you're a Bruce fan, you get it because you understand how it speaks to you, whether you think the song was written for you, about you, or something in your life. And then it's just good music.
Yeah.
This stuff isn't just thrown together. And then you see the concert. And again, it's the engagement that they have with the audience that you are as much a part of this as we are up here on stage.
Is not a fair barometer of how big of a fan you are.
Right.
So obviously you came to Bruce late.
Yeah.
So do you count how many times you've seen him?
I think I'm on 14 or 15. So let me tell you, I found out they were going to go on this tour and I was like so excited. So my very first show ever was in Denver.
Okay.
And I used to live in Denver. It's where I knocked out all 4 of my front teeth when I was a little kid. But yeah, my very first show was in Denver. Then I got to go to the Newark show.
Yeah.
And then I had so much fun at that. I spent a ton of money and went to the show in Brooklyn. And then I just decided COVID changed the way I looked at the world in my life.
Tell me a little bit about that. What do you mean?
I'm one of those moms that I don't want my children to ever have to suffer any pain or sorrow. And same with my grandchildren.
Right.
So everything I do with my money is I got to give this to Derek or Josh, or I got to do this for the grandkids. And I was always, I'm not going to say bailing them out, but I was always being that safety net for them and never really doing anything for myself. And always saying that I can save that for retirement because I got to make sure that they're okay. And I kept always saying about myself, you'll have time to do that later. When COVID hit, I was serving on city council at the time. And so I saw it from all angles. And it just, being locked up in my basement, trying to teach my students over a computer, and just all of the uncertainty and the scariness that came with it when it first came out, I just told myself, I'm going to quit waiting for the right time to do things because you don't know if you're going to get that opportunity. I think of all the things that I had planned as a city council member that I was going to do for my community, and all of it got derailed because of that. And so that's how COVID changed me. I said, you need to live your life now for you while you're still alive, and you can do it. And you can deal with whatever happens the next day. It will work out.
When people ask me, especially casual people who aren't Bruce fans, what's your favorite Bruce song? Most people don't know those songs unless you're a Bruce fan, right? The idea is you're all sitting around waiting for my life to begin. And while it's all just slipping away. And I just think too many of us do that, Kathy. After I get my degree, then I'll be happy. After the kids get out of diapers, then we'll enjoy them. After I retire, then I'm going to have fun. And it just isn't, it isn't that case at all, is it?
It's not. And so what happened with me is they're going to Europe. And I've always wanted to go back to Europe because I used to live in Germany. I wanted to share a show with her. And so I just told my husband, who is amazingly supportive. So I just told him, I said, I'm going to go to Europe and follow the tour. So I went to Europe and I did 8 different shows in 28 days. It was awesome. It was incredible. I did it all by myself. It was just a really good self-exploration, growing experience, not to mention just a ton of fun, all of the shows that I got to see. So I did 8 shows in Europe, and then I came back and I saw him in San Francisco, saw him in Vegas, and I got to go to, I splurged because again, I don't care at this point. I'm not waiting for the perfect moment or the perfect dollar sign in my bank account. I'll figure it out. I got a good job. I got, knock on wood, I've still got good health. I'll just keep working. And so I splurged and I was on the rail for See Here Now in Asbury.
Wow.
Yes. Like to me, that moment and what I experienced with the people there that were just so kind to me, and because that's just who Bruce people are, being at See Here Now on the rail in Asbury Park, that made up for everything that I missed. It
Wow.
was like, I had this conversation with Mr. Van Zandt one time because I've gotten to know him because of Teach Rock. And I shared with him how disappointing it was that they had been around and I had been searching for that kind of music my whole life, missed it. And he said, "You found us now, stick around and we'll blow your mind."
Wow.
And you know what? They have. They have blown my mind, both with, I could do an entire podcast if your listeners were interested on Teach Rock and the righteous work that Stevie Van Zandt organization is doing for teachers and students. Like that is just, man.
I do want you to come back, Kathy. I think I'd like you to take a few minutes to talk about what I perceive as a crisis on education and that, but I do think I would love to have you come back and we do a focus on that, if you don't mind.
I would love that. Just real quickly, teachers are understaffed, underpaid. The
Yeah.
family unit is not what it was when you and I were growing up. And so
No.
it makes educating children that much more difficult. Kids do not have as many good adult mentors in their life like we did. But we are still expected to work miracles with our children in this very different environment. And we're trying to do it in an old, antiquated way that just does not work. And so you've got to better fund, better staff, and you've got to transform education. You have to change the way you are connecting with kids if you want them to be in school and tune into what you have to teach them. And that's what Teach Rock is doing.
What I don't understand, and I loved in the documentary, I think it was Little Steven, where he talked about, oh, Beyonce is your favorite artist. Oh, okay. Then do you know Aretha Franklin and the civil rights movement and connect that where you do? She had to quit, ended up going to the emergency room and everything. We got her little ambulance as her trophy.
Well played.
And when she was younger, she said, if I could not be good at something, I wouldn't try. I wouldn't try out for a club unless I knew I was going to make it because I didn't want that. And she goes, sports taught her that it's okay to try. And I think the same thing could be said for arts. We don't want to invest. For some reason, people are just, it's the hypocrisy that makes me the most mad, Kathy, is okay, then invest more money into math and sciences.
The cutting of the arts and music, they cut it because they call it fluff, because it's not testable. It's not on some standardized test, but they don't understand that what is the value of art and music. First of all, everyone connects to it in one form or another. So now I have your attention. And once I have your attention, I can teach you. But the principles that art and music are built around, you see them in science, you see them in mathematics, you see it in literature. It exists because of history.
Yeah.
And so it is tragic that the strongest thing that we have that we can reach out and connect all disciplines to and relate to all people of all walks of life, regardless of what music they like, what form of art they like. Art and music should be at the core of our education just as much as math and science, because the principles that make music work can be explained mathematically. I always tell my students when they're like, why do I got to take this class? I explain, here's why you take science. You take science because science explains the way the physical world works. Now you take math because math is the language to express what we understand how the physical world works. And if you can't write it out mathematically, then it's incorrect. Language is the way that we communicate with each other. And there's a reason we don't call it English class. We call it language arts. Communication is an art form. And so language is the way that we transmit knowledge back and forth to each other. And then history is the story of people. And we learn that history so that we can understand why the world is the way it is today. I understand we have that great saying that so we can learn from the lessons of the past. If that were true, we are like the slowest learners on the planet.
Amen.
Like I have this scar on my leg from when I was 5 years old and I wanted to go play with the neighbor's dog. So I snuck over into their yard, but they had a barbed wire fence and I got caught up on the barbed wire and I slashed my leg open. And I have that scar. So if people ask me, what happened to your leg? I can say, let me tell you this story. Now you understand why my leg is the way it is. That is what history is. It explains why our society is the way it is. And the great thing about that is when kids understand that and then you allow them to express what they learned through music and art, or you connect them to that content through music and art, they eat it up. I cannot tell you how Teach Rock has transformed my relationship in the classroom and my student success rate in the classroom.
Good. I'm gonna have you back and we're gonna talk some more about that and how to support that and do it. With this new baptism of spirit, do you have some favorite albums or songs?
This is the embarrassing part about me, because I know that the real true Bruce fans can go through the albums and list them, and they can probably name the songs in order, and they know all of the lyrics. As a teacher, every year I'm required to memorize like 150, 160 different names. And at 61, it's getting more and more difficult. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And so I've come to terms with the fact that when you say, what's your favorite song? I could go through a bunch of them, but that's just not stuff I keep in my head because I don't have room for it based on what it is. But
I totally get that.
For sure, The River is an album that speaks to me a lot. Okay. I like Lucky Town. And of course I love tracks. You mentioned your wife, Linda, and Linda, Won't You Let Me Be the One? That's on Tracks. Yes. I love that song, Queen of the Supermarket. One song that really spoke to me was on the Letter to You album, which oh my gosh, I love that album. I've watched the show over and over again. House of a Thousand Guitars. Nobody talks about that. Love that song, but I've always been a sucker for the ballad and the slow song. That was always my thing. The one song I really want to hear live, and this is why I am willing to pay whatever price I have to pay to keep going to these shows. I went to San Francisco and it was during Easter, and I was right up front and I made this little Easter egg cardboard. And then I wrote on it, I need a priest. And I was right up front and Bruce saw it and he looked at it. And I was really hoping I would get it and I didn't, but I love Bruce Springsteen. But because of what Stevie has done for education, what he has done for me in my life, and I attribute Steven Van Zandt to me discovering what I was missing in my life, and that was the E Street Band. I worship Steven Van Zandt for his activism and everything that he's done. And I want to be right there in front of him and hear that solo for Priest. To me, that would be it.
So it's funny. One of my other podcasts, I do a Doctor Who podcast.
Okay.
And it's a little weird because Torchwood was a spinoff of Doctor Who. And for you people who are not nerds, just give me a few minutes. I'm going to stick the landing, I hope. But I happened to watch Torchwood first, and I really Torchwood. And so I went to one of my best friends who is a massive Doctor Who fan, and I said, hey, I really like this character, Jack, that's in Torchwood. Can you tell me what episodes of Doctor Who he's in? Because I want to watch those episodes. And Ken said, it's easier just to give you the season. Here, this is just watch it because you won't understand out of context. And then I became a Doctor Who fan. So I found Doctor Who via Torchwood, which is usually the other way around.
Yeah. And I have so much respect and admiration for him as a person because, like I said, I'm very passionate about education. So when people start getting into the education line, because one of the problems that we do have with education is a lot of people are always talking about, look at how much money we're given to education. I always say that what we're doing is laundering money through education, because you give all this money to districts And then you mandate that they give it to these different corporations who then give us textbooks and programs. And those are not what we need. And so when I see somebody coming into my education lane and offering some sort of curriculum, this is how I know Stevie's the real deal. What he is giving is worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, and he's giving it to teachers for free. Like that right there. When I learned about him, I wanted to know, who is this Stevie Van Zandt getting into my teacher lane? Because I do not take kindly to people coming in and messing with education. I know people think I'm a little obsessed or I might be this groupie, but no, I'm just somebody who is very passionate about education. And I happen to find somebody who inspires me to be a better teacher because of what he is doing to help education. And I want to be the Stevie Van Zandt of the classroom.
When he jokes about being the world's worst businessman in the world, but I just think he has a higher calling.
Yeah, he's not an ordinary average guy. And I think you could say that about all the E Street members.
Yeah, I do too.
And you could say that about Bruce. What a gift. But Stevie Van Zandt is absolutely an equal gift.
Yeah.
To all that he has contributed across all lanes of from social activism to education to what he does with production and movies and television and what he does for other musicians. And he does it because he loves to give to them and help other people out.
Yeah.
Like he just likes making life better for other people. And that is unique in the entertainment industry, probably.
Yeah, I think so too. I remember
any industry.
When his documentary came out, Karen and Lou and I take turns picking topics and we discuss it on a pop culture podcast. I said, hey, I want to watch his documentary. And they're like, okay, yeah, it's a Bruce one. No, we get it. And both Karen and Lou were speechless of the amount of things he did. They're like, what? Just, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Like when you think about what he's done, and yeah, that's great.
Incredible.
Yeah. So you've talked Priest, and by the way, in 23, when there was a lot of complaints about the static set list, the no changing, I always said, I got Priest twice, so I'm going to shut the F up. I cannot complain about anything. To use the sports analogy, I try to explain to people like, why do you keep wanting to see Bruce? Why do you want to go? And I said, you know how in a football game, they miss the extra point and it feels like they chase that extra point the rest of the game. That 1 point they had made, if they had gone for the 1 instead of the 2, I said, because my first show wasn't till 2002, I'm playing catch up. I was lucky enough to hear it twice. So you've said that. Other songs you're chasing, Kathy?
Oh, I love Sunny Day. I would love to hear Blood Brothers, even though it's the slow stuff. Absolutely. I would love to hear that because those were the songs that were playing in that concert. I remember when I watched the Sunny Day and he goes sliding across the stage and just the joy. And I went to school a few days later and I asked my kids, I want you to tell me what you think joy looks like and what you think passion looks like. And so they did this quick little writing activity about what you could draw a picture of joy, what would be in your picture. And I said, I want to show you what joy and passion looks like to me. And I showed them that clip of Bruce and Sunny Day and they loved it. They thought it was great and they got it. I want to see that. Oh my gosh. Ramrods. I would love to see Ramrod or hear Ramrod. Those were great songs. Anything off of the Seeger sessions. Okay. When I ran for city council, when I was campaigning, we had a 4th of July parade. What I did on my campaign was I got some kids that worked on my campaign because I teach history, government, economics, intro to education. And I asked some kids that wanted community service that wanted to help me on my campaign if they wanted to put that on the resume to come on up. And they did. And I set up this big speaker in a wagon and the kids pulled it. And I played that album. And the parade was a 5-mile route. And I danced to Bruce Springsteen for 5 miles to the Seeger Sessions album, Climbing Jacob's Ladder, any of those, because that takes me back to those hardcore Baptist days. And
when every time the Live in Dublin and he goes, and they do, I feel like I'm in Southern Baptist camp, like summer
Yeah,
camp, something. Yeah.
absolutely. I grew up singing that song, and I think that's one of the reasons that album speaks to me so much.
Yeah.
It does take me back, and it's just good music. I love that kind of music.
Yeah.
Trying to think of some other songs that I'd really like to be able to hear. I love the Lucky Town album.
Yeah.
I think this is one we're all waiting for, but we got it at See Here Now, I'm pretty sure. Jungle Land.
Want one song from Western Stars? Just once. I want to hear the band do something.
Do you have a favorite one from Western Song?
I love Tucson Train.
Yeah, that's what I
because
was gonna say. Tucson Train.
because I see the film in my mind. I see the guy singing or gal singing, and I
Yeah.
just see them telling their partner, give me the weekend. Just come spend the weekend with me. Separate bedrooms. I'll put you up in a hotel. I just want to show you how a man can change. I can show you that I am not the person. I know I've betrayed you. I know I've hurt you. I know I don't deserve a second chance, but just give me the weekend and I
Yeah.
can show you. And I love that. I love that song.
I think Western Stars came out like right as the pandemic was hitting. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, right around. Yeah.
Yeah, right around. And I remember, so I live in this two town, Wendover, Utah, West Wendover, Nevada. We are a combined 5 miles long, the two
Yeah.
towns. Population of the two towns is about 5,000. And then there is nothing for 120 miles either direction. And so I live in the middle of this desert. And so I did have the good fortune of being able to go out into the desert, and you're out there all by yourself. And I went out there, and my beagle, I'll try not to get emotional, my dog Bull, who I just lost just almost a year ago now.
Mm-hmm.
He and I would go out, and I would listen to that album when it first came out. And I was just, really downloading a lot of the Bruce songs and just getting caught up on everything.
Yeah.
Bruce. I just go back to those days where I was out in the desert and there was just nobody around. Nobody was out and about.
Yeah.
It was March, April, so the weather's still not all that great. And I would just walk with my dog and he would just run and howl all over the place. And it's really cool because there's this great big long train track that runs in our town because we're along the I-80 corridor. That song would come on and I'd see the train out there. And when it's like the land that time forgot where I live. There is just nothing and you can see for miles and miles. And when I think of that album, I know there's been a lot of mixed reviews, but for me, that was the first album that was a new release after I discovered Bruce. So that album, to me, I appreciate that album and I love the music.
Some people
are just like, that's not really the Bruce we know. I have a total different appreciation for it because it is something different. It was another introduction to who is Bruce. That was a historic time in all of our lives. We all went through the same storm, but we all were in different vessels. And so we all have our own stories. And Western Stars will always be a part of my story in COVID. Me, Bull, and Western Stars in the desert and Tucson Train. But I call it the Winter Train.
I love it. Okay, I'm going to have you come back. We need to talk about Teach Rock. Yes. We need to talk about the importance of teaching history and government. It is a very scary time in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And so I'd love to have you on and we talk a little bit more about that and talk about hope. And I do feel Bruce's music and Steven's music and the E Street Band give me hope and bring me joy. And so we need more of that. All right.
I can't thank you enough for this. You are exactly why I love Bruce Springsteen so much, because he has found a way to connect us with people that had it not been for Bruce, you and I would have never crossed paths. And yet I feel like I have this lifelong friendship and bond with you and connection that we have been friends forever. And we relate on so many things. And it's really special when you meet people like that, when you connect.
So I was working on my resume. I was going to be looking for a new job. And Craig Colby, who's been on the podcast a couple of times, said, you know what you should do on your resume? Do you talk about being a podcast host? And I go under hobbies. He goes, I think you should push it because you know what you've done? you've created a network of people who support you and support that podcast and support each other.
Yeah.
And he says, and really, what is leadership? Building a team,
Yeah.
building a network.
Yeah.
He says, and you can show that is, and so I reached out to the people that were writing my resume and they said, absolutely. And boy, they added a whole little thing on that. I just do this because it's fun. And I love meeting people. I get asked all the time, are you ever tired? I said, yeah, sometimes I get really tired. But the moment this Zoom comes up and I'm seeing the person I'm talking to, it just goes away. I would do this if no one listened. So thank you, Kathy. Thank you. I'm going to give you a chance in a minute to let people know how they can reach you and any final thoughts. But I got to end with the Mary question. For those of you who may be students of Kathy or Kathy's friends or family, the Mary question is how I end every podcast. Do you think Mary gets in the car? Kathy, that is your question. Does Mary get in the car at the end of Thunder Road?
Absolutely, she gets in the car. There's so many different endings that you could write to that, and so many other stories that will develop from that. But I think Mary gets in the car, and I know if I was Mary, you wouldn't have to ask me twice.
Very nice. Any final thoughts, and how can we reach you?
My final thoughts are, Jesse, you are a gift. Thank you for sharing your gift of connecting us all. I can see the passion for what you do, and you're very good at what you do. So thank you so much. People can reach me. I'm on Facebook, Kathy Leonard Durham. I'm also on X, which I am Nana Teacher 22. And I'm also on Blue Sky, Nana Teacher 22. So Nana Teacher 22 on both X, Twitter, and Blue Sky, Kathy Leonard Durham on Facebook. And I'm a member of the Spring Nuts group there on Facebook too. So you can find me there. So Jesse, this has been an honor and a privilege. Thank you so much.
I am thrilled that we got to spend time. I'm going to have you back. We're going to talk a little more serious subjects, but we'll still have fun. So thank you,
always.
Kathy. Always fun. Listeners, remember to be safe, be kind, and we'll talk to you soon. Goodbye.